Yes, it's my pleasure today to introduce Ken Woodruff to you. Ken Woodruff is the Civil Rights Program Manager for the FHWA Indiana Division. He's held that position for 19 years. Ken is responsible for affirmative action programs such as the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program and the On-the-Job Training Program, as well as being responsible for non-discrimination compliance under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Prior to joining the Indiana Division of FHWA, Ken worked for FHWA's Maryland Division as a realty specialist in the professional development programs. Ken holds a Master of Public Administration from Southern Illinois University Carbondale. He recently celebrated his 30th wedding anniversary with his wife, Mary Jo, and he has two pretty great kids. One is a junior in high school and one is a junior in college. And also, and probably most importantly, a sweet 12-year-old Labrador that is constantly on the prowl for food and or a belly rub.
Hey, thank you guys very much for letting me once again talk to you a little bit about ADA. As I was listening to Eric's, Mr. Zimmerman's presentation, I saw that 59% increase in TAP funding. And just a quick reminder that disability-related projects are fundable through TAP, and so I will expect to see at least a 59% increase in the number of projects. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the pedestrian work zones. Over time, over the past, we've worked on the transition plans with you guys, and man, to this day, it's still one of my most. I'm very proud of the state of Indiana, and I brag on us all the time about how well we're doing on transition plans. At the same time, I see a lot of work zones out there that really are relying on things like police tape and all. And it's time that we kind of recognize the practical implications of the work zones and how they impact people's lives, especially those with people with disabilities. And so with that, I thought I'd try to push forward some ideas, talk about the laws a little bit, talk about the regulations, and then just show you some examples out there, and some resources to help you guys through. So, like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the laws and the guidance that's out there, and I'll just push on through that. That's just so to be clear, I consider this sort of ongoing. That's what I was driving at before. I think, we're doing a really good job here in Indiana. We still have a ways to go. It is ongoing. We are getting better. I've watched over time, just watched a lot of, curb ramps being installed in some of the most unusual small towns and all that. And again, I kind of attribute a lot of that success to the work that you guys did with your communities and getting the transition plans. And then really need to give kind of a shout out to AIM and the development of the Indiana ADA Coordinators Association through AIM, the Accelerated Indiana Municipalities Group, and then the County Engineering Group. They really are pushing this forward, and it seems to be a different state than it was, say, 10 years ago. And I'm just super proud of what we're doing. But having said that, we really need to, this is kind of in the spirit of safety and all that, but we need to keep working and make sure that our work zones are either accessible or, there's an accessible route around them. Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Part A, it applies to public entities, state and local governments in particular, and there is a specific prohibition against discrimination in that law, and that's not, unlike the transition plan where it was, if you had staff of 50 or more, you had to have a transition plan. This part is just if you are a state government, local government, ADA applies. So there's no staffing criteria on that. Rather, the administrative burden of the transition plan was commensurate with your staffing. or with the community staffing. So, but just to say, you may not discriminate, and that's going to be, kind of a theme here. And then Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, we often talk of these things together, but that applies to recipients. So actually 504 would apply to, say, the MPOs themselves, as well as the local governments who receive any federal dollars. So in this case, we would be interested in, US DOT dollars because we're talking about transportation system. But having said that, Section 504 also, grounds us in this idea that you may not discriminate. Very simple, very, very clear. Here we go, some more. This is from the Department of Justice. 28 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, 35, Section 103. Again, no discrimination. Just kind of reiterates that. Same with 149. No qualified individual with a disability shall, because of a public entity's facilities or inaccessible use, with any disability, be excluded from participation in or denied the benefits of services, programs, or activities of a public entity. Now, in this case, we're talking about sidewalks, and it has been fairly well established that, sidewalks are a program. So just so we're clear. Public entities shall take appropriate steps to ensure communications. And this is important in the context of the work zone. So the barriers, the signage, all those, just in general, those are communicating to the public and the traveling public, be it in vehicles or on, pedestrians. Something's up. And so we need to be able to, I kind of cover the idea of signage and barriers, et cetera, under this idea of communications, if that helps with it, helps you understand. So signs may be ineffective to people with vision disabilities, right? So, and then police tape is undetectable by long canes. There are some very specific ways of making sure that people can wayfind, that is, get their way through a work zone using long canes. They need to be, kind of a, I call it kind of a positive barrier, something that someone can hit and then follow to make sure they're not going in. And then work zone barrier signs are communication devices, as I noted. So 49 CFR Part 27, that's really the Department of Transportation's 504 regulation. So this is if you are a recipient receiving federal financial assistance, right? So, and then again, this discrimination is prohibited. Generally, no qualified handicapped person shall solely by reason of disability be excluded from participation in, denied the benefit of, otherwise be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity that receives federal financial assistance. And again, there's kind of emphasis added, and I used to put a sick there, just kind of the term, here we go. I used to kind of just note here that the term handicap is now not really in favor. So it's, people with disabilities or something. So I sort of, the terminology has shifted somewhat since this regulation was put out there. I just put that out there. And then really I want to just point out that these other, the other parts, 49 CFR 7B through E, B just kind of continues to emphasize the non-discrimination part. And then C is very important. That is the communications. And it I just want to remind you that, work zones and the signage, all the barriers are all kind of communication devices, right? They're all ways to communicate something's up. And then D is like aid, benefits, and services. You need to be able to provide these types of things. And then E is just reasonable accommodation. The idea of reasonable modification is also sort of used interchangeably. So, just make sure that what you do is reasonably communicates, reasonably accommodates people with disabilities. And then section 9 are the assurances that recipients say that they will not discriminate with these dollars, and that's important. Like NDOT provides us every year a general non-discrimination assurance in order to get access to federal dollars, and then I believe that's carried on through appendices in any kind of state local agreement, etc. So there are also some guidance resources out there that we rely on somewhat. One of them particularly the MUTCD, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And then NDOT has their own version, the IMUTCD, which is essentially the same. There are some modifications in language, et cetera, through their manual, but in essence, it's the same. The MUTCD comes with sort of the power of regulation. It's actually adopted through 23 CFR. The MUTCD is kind of brought in as actual regulation. And then there's a couple other guidance resources that I sort of have found, and there are plenty. Believe me, there's so much out there when it comes to ADA, be it design or recommendations. But the pedestrian accommodation in work zones, a field guide, work zone safety, that's from the Work Zone Safety Consortium. I think the last one I saw was done in 2018. I'm not sure if they update that regularly, but it's a really nice document, and I believe that it is been posted as a handout for you guys. And then the pedestrian checklist and considerations for temporary traffic control zones by ATSA, the American Traffic Safety Services Association. Again, I believe that's been posted as a handout in that kind of chat part. I have handed that out. I think, when you guys were hosting me to do the ADA transition plan trainings and all that, I would hand that checklist out like candy. It was just, it's pretty decent. It talks about like in the planning stage and how to phase your project, things to consider and phasing and putting together kind of your schedule and all that. And then there's some practical, like, during the construction itself, there's some kind of checklists, and I always thought that it was really solid things to consider. It's a good checklist to use, and it can help planners, project managers, and all that kind of make good decisions on it. So we'll start with the MUTCD. 6D is the standard. The way the MUTCD is written, there are standards. Those are the shall statements, and then there's kind of advisories along the way but this is a shall, the standard. When existing pedestrian facilities are disrupted, closed, or relocated in a temporary traffic control zone, a TCC, the temporary facilities shall be detectable and include accessibility features consistent with the features present in the existing pedestrian facility. So what that's saying is, if you have a 4-foot sidewalk, they really are telling you to put in a 4-foot temporary path. Here's that site, by the way. 23 CFR Part 655 incorporates it as regulations, and follow that up. But so it's just saying, try to mimic what you have there on site to the best that you can. I was kind of in discussion putting this presentation together, and there's some discussion on how enforceable temporary work zones are in terms of accessibility standards. That noted, if you're not doing it, then you're starting to get into that discrimination element, and that's so just strongly encouraged to make your work zones as accessible as possible. So here's the figure 6H29, and this kind of outlines a very idealistic, extremely ideal sort of scenario. But you can see the work zone there. There's signage there that's closed the sidewalk. There are crosswalks that are there. There's a temporary crosswalk. I don't know if you can see my arrow, but up on the sort of the upper side to the right, there's that mid-block crossing. And actually, there's a little note here about mid-blocks that we'll get to here in a second. But the idea here, I added, there's this blue blocks, a blue block, and then that big no circle with the red X. So what I'm trying to indicate there is if there's no public accommodation where that blue box with the red X's or whatever, then please consider closing the sidewalk sooner. If a person has issues with their sight or whatever and cannot see the work zone ahead of them, they may be walking all the way to that work zone just to find out that they can't get through there. And so the idea is to try to encourage them to cross over, get away from the work site sooner than having to walk to the work zone and then getting back. So traffic control devices shall be defined as all signs, signals, markings, and other devices to regulate, warn, or guide road users placed on, over, or adjacent to a street, highway, private road open to the public travel, pedestrian facility, or bikeway by authority of a public body or official having jurisdiction. Wow, that that kind of says it all, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. If there's a work zone and you're a local government that's responsible, or state that's responsible, right, then you need to put up the traffic control, and this we'll go through sort of the elements of this in a little bit, but like I said, just kind of consider the closing that sooner if there's no public accommodation, which is important. Close the sidewalk sooner, get people on the other side of the road as quickly as you can. I want you to note here, there's up on you can see the work zone, all the black hash. Then to the left of that, and the sort of the crosswalk that goes left to right, you can see there's a closure sign right there on that side of the sidewalk, or that crosswalk, so people don't don't walk into that, and the same with this further north. So all that is very important to try to communicate as best you can. I would say that those signs need to be more than signs; they need to be barriers. Come on. So here, this is kind of reiterates what what I was just talking about. This being closed a little sooner. Down here, the MUTCD 6D, it's just a support statement. It must be recognized that pedestrians are reluctant to retrace their steps to a prior intersection for a crossing, or to add distance or out of the way travel destination. So what they're suggesting is that if somebody got up there, they may cross where they shouldn't. They may make their own mid-block crossing. And again, there's a little bit more here on mid-block crossings. They're really not encouraged. They may be necessary in certain circumstances, but the idea is to try to get folks to cross at established crosswalks, again, unless there's public accommodation along the pedestrian accessible route, the PAR, prior to the work zone. So, and then this is a guidance statement. Consideration should be made to separate pedestrian movements from both worksite and vehicular traffic. So again, that's just saying, just get them across the road away from, unless an acceptable route that does not involve crossing the roadway can be provided, pedestrians should be appropriately directed with advanced signage that encourages them to cross to the opposite side of the roadway. And here's this, in urban and suburban areas with high vehicular volumes, these signs should be placed at intersections rather than mid-block locations. So, you know, it's where it's established, it's where traffic is anticipating individuals crossing. While there are some mid-block crossings that are very relevant and very great, actually, they serve an incredibly important function. What they're saying is, in light of this work zone, you know, just for the work zone, try to get folks to cross at the crosswalks that are established. That's where everybody's expecting them. So that to me is, again, sort of this practical application of the MUTCD. Everything in the MUTCD is very idealized, as I noted. And actually, I was at a presentation of a gentleman who's actually part of, they're rewriting the MUTCD. They're redoing it. I don't know where that is in process. I was going to ask this morning, and I just got kind of busy. Having said that, there are some elements even within this particular diagram that are going to change. They're going to put more of a solid barrier line along the work zone itself in order to indicate that people, you know, cannot get into it, as opposed to just the crosshatch. I knew that was one of the things they're considering adding. So there are even things within this particular illustration that are subject to change. We'll see how it goes. I'll definitely share it with you when I get a chance. So here in that work zone, you know, you can see that there was advanced signage. The detour signs were there showing alternative routes, and there is potential for audible information. There may be scenarios where audible information is important to use. There were temporary crosswalks, as we noted. We're kind of going to assume that there were temporary and compliant ramps there, and they're marked. You know, the crosswalks are marked somehow, be they temporary or whatever. Detectable barriers at the work zone and at the curb ramps across from the work zone. So that was, let me go back one. That's, you know, there's a barrier. You know, there's a barrier up at the crosswalk to the north. There's a barrier to the crosswalk to the, we'll call it to the west, and so all that. And then other considerations: when it's not possible to maintain a minimum width of 60 inches throughout the entire length of the alternative pedestrian pathway, which it likely isn't, you still should allow a 5x5 level passing area within any 200-foot stretch. That kind of enables really like two wheelchairs to get past one another going in opposite directions, if that makes sense. So that's kind of a carryover from the ADAG, actually. It just kind of helps accommodate pedestrians. So I took these photos down in southern Indiana at a project, and this is really very typically seen around. I see a lot of police tape, a lot of orange cones that really are not detectable at all. They don't provide the kind of, I'll call it safety, but they don't communicate in a way at all to somebody who's sight impaired. And so the ADA will require you to, you know, again, not discriminate. So you can see, start on the picture on the left, there's a sawhorse there, there's a, you know, a barrier there, and that's close. You know, it'd be great if it were wider, like if it really took up the entire width of that sidewalk. That would be a really good way to keep people from walking into that work zone. However, at the same time, if you were going, you know, I'm going to call it left, if you were to go kind of up the road from there, you know, there should be an alternative crossing, you know, that stretch of sidewalk. There should be some way to indicate that they needed to cross the road sooner, so somebody didn't walk all the way to that work zone just to have to turn around or try to cross somewhere where they really shouldn't be. So again, not detectable at all. The police tape can't be detected by long cane. And the sidewalk closed sign, well, you know, yeah, the sidewalk's closed, but I could definitely see somebody walking right past that sign without knowing it was there, actually potentially tripping on it. So there really needs to be some kind of barrier that's, well, again, I'm going to use the term more positive, right? Instead of just in language, you know, just in signage, you need to also have something that's a physical barrier. This is the same work zone. As I was talking to the project manager on this project, I said, you know, there should be a road close or a you know, sidewalk close sign right where, you know, it says closed ramp right on this side, you know. So they have this cone that was really just protecting the where they were going to be installing an actuator, I believe, you know, for pedestrian lights, which is great. I hope they were putting in APS. Having said that, he just noted, well, yeah, everybody can see that, you know, there's a work zone over there. I said, well, yeah, actually not everybody can see. You know, there are people who are sight impaired and we need to close this. And so they did. I mean, they did follow this up. But again, this is very typical of what I see. And the same issue here, this is the opposite side of the road. They were putting in their detectable warnings. Those were going to go in quite nicely. They were doing a good job. The ramp was not too steep or anything. Everything was going well, but the work zone itself could be accessed, right? So, you know, again, tape isn't detectable, and there needed to be a barrier across, you know, some sort of physical barrier across that where that little hole where the detectable warnings were going in. Similarly, there's a sawhorse up, kind of, I'm going to call it north on this photo on the right. You know, just something in front of that crossed the entire width of that sidewalk would be a really nice touch, as well as some sort of advance warning up at that stoplight you're seeing up to the very far end of this photo, up to the, I'm going to call it north. In the photograph, you know, there should be some kind of indicator that, you know, you need to cross now, and there wasn't anything up there. And so, having said all that, again, this is quite typical. You know, I see these everywhere. I was driving through Ohio the other week, and I saw a whole section of sidewalk gone that was only protected by police tape, you know, and I just couldn't imagine being more frustrated, you know, if I had walked there, you know, potentially fallen in, you know, in my mind, it sort of sets the local government up for, you know, or whoever the owner up for potential action by a citizen. So the signage on that was poorly placed. It was missing. There were no detour directions, as I noted. The barriers were either non-existent, missing, or non-detectable. So that's kind of what we see. That's what I'd love to start getting us through the next this next phase in our ADA. You know, actuating the ADA, you know, in a better way. Now here's an example of when you have to borrow a lane of traffic. There are some arrows there that I was instructed to take out because it kind of had some sort of wish list as opposed to requirements. And so, but having said that, obviously, if you need to cross the curb, then you need to provide a ramp that's accessible down through. This width has to be at least 36 inches wide. That's the ADA. ProAg would have you at 4 feet. So that's, but here you can see there's a detectable barrier down the length of that work zone. That is kind of more like what I think they're going to be putting in the MUTCD here. And then there are crash-proof barriers that's attenuated on one side, so that, you know, if traffic were to hit that, you know, there'd be a hopefully minimized impact to the work zone. And here down on the bottom, it says a flasher is optional. And then the other thing is that you may have some audible warning as well. And so, you know, this is, again, pretty idealistic, but at the same time, there may be scenarios where you would really encourage your project managers or your scoping to include this kind of, you know, depending on how busy this pedestrian route is, how close we are to, schools or government center, the kind of the regular sort of considerations in ADA, you may really encourage the use of something audible as well as, hypervisual and all that. That's kind of the point of this. It's not just kind of the point, it is the point. So there are crash-proof barriers between pedestrian and motorists, the attenuator in front of the barriers, that comes right out of the MUTCD. Temporary 36-inch minimum, detectable pedestrian barriers adjacent to the work zone, advanced warning signs, temporary and compliant ramps. And that's real important, that less than 8%, to the extent that you can, stable and smooth materials, non-slip, to the, all that applies. So, and that's what we want to encourage. So here are some examples in Indiana that I've found that are really pretty good. Maybe not the best in the world, but I thought, way closer to what we would want to see. On the left is I think it's, I'm going to say 231, maybe it's in Crawfordsville. They were redoing some signal. There was a signal project, and then they were doing the ramps. And I think they were also doing pavement along with that. And so you can see they have kind of a real, definitely positive barriers. While I think the wind had blown those two over, notwithstanding, they were going to be detectable. But you can see the one, again, I'm going to call it on the north side of that photograph, where somebody would walk right into that. Like the cane would hit that. What I do believe is missing there, was a temporary crossing and warning before the project to get people to cross to the other side of the street prior to getting into the work zone. And then on the right, this is Greencastle. It was I can't remember the name of the grant, but hometown, I can't remember the name of the grant, I'm sorry, but they had actually borrowed did some road digesting. They had taken a lane of traffic there to increase parking and improve their pedestrian facility along a little stretch. And you can see there that nobody was getting into that work zone. It just wasn't going to happen. And there was actually no need for signage for crossing, because right kind of on the bottom left of that picture is actually a ramp, and it goes right into a crosswalk. And so at least during this phase of the project, there was no need for temporary crossing markings or any of that. But really a great touch, just a nice way to keep people out of that work zone. I'd love to see more of that around. So this is that pedestrian accommodation and work zone, a field guide. Yeah, again, like I said, it was 2018. There's a link. I'm not sure how hot that's going to be by the time you guys get a hold of it, but I kind of read through it, and I sort of felt there were like 11 principles to follow out of this publication. And some of them are just so obvious, not really even worth saying, but yet I'm going to say them because that's just the way I am. Pedestrians are protected from trenches and holes adjacent to the pedestrian accessible route. Pedestrians cannot walk into the workspace. Provide good sight lines for motorists, pedestrians, and the signals that you're using. That seems like a no-brainer, but I could certainly see a scenario where maybe there's a building or something that's kind of interrupting sight lines, so try to optimize that. Access to transit stops is maintained and buses are accommodated. I've seen photos in other presentations where, you know, there's a bus stop that's actually in the work zone, you know, and people are sitting there. You know, that's that kind of stuff, you know, that's sort of the kind of how you phase your construction. You might be able to help accommodate that or provide temporary transit stops or something along those lines. Any obstacles on the PAR itself or the temporary PAR are removed. And I think the example I think they used were like, you know, piles of material, you know, that are used for the construction. You know, putting that on the PAR is probably not very positive for accessibility. It's clearly marked and detectable for pedestrians with vision disabilities. It's wide enough to accommodate wheelchairs, and I'll just point back to that every 200 feet, you know, please allow opportunity for 2 wheelchairs to pass in the scenario that they meet one another. The surface is smooth, solid, non-slip. It has compliant temporary curb ramps where needed. That is, you know, make them as to the best of your ability wide. You know, less than 8%, you know, is a good practice, 8.3, but, you know, just, you know, try not to make them too steep. If you can help it, if you need to lengthen them slightly to accommodate that, then do that. It's protected from vehicles with crash resistance barriers, and detour routes accommodate pedestrians with disabilities. And, you know, you want those detour routes to be as short and as compliant as possible. Common concerns, traffic signs, often see work zones ahead, signs blocking sidewalk access. This is very common. You know, I've stopped at a lot of projects just asking them to please move their sign out of the sidewalk. Limited right-of-way, inadequate construction easements, perhaps, you know, so make sure that the project is scoped well enough to provide opportunity for the construction to go forward. Private work using the PAR, this may be an ordinance thing, you know, an enforcement issue for your building or for you know, building inspectors and all that. I actually have had a couple of complaints regarding private work impacting the PAR, and so, you know, it's sort of one of those things that does happen, right? And so, you know, to the extent that again, you know, ordinances, whatever can, and or enforcement of those ordinances can address that specifically for construction companies, that'd be great. Relying on the temporary PAR for space during construction, leaving tools and parking equipment on the sidewalk, again, something that come across every once in a while. And then sufficient scoping, I think I'd mentioned that. Do you or the contract have the right to be using, i.e. repairing the pedestrian, and then accommodating businesses, which is a constant, you know, like, you know, the businesses are always needing to make sure that the work, you know, is scoped or phased in a way that optimizes their ability to remain open through the construction. Here's an example of a blocked PAR. This is in a town that has a lot of astronauts come hang out for a few years, and this was there. So you know, it was unfortunate, easy to move, you know, to right here, you know, right to the left of that, you know, it took care of the problem. But you know, that was a long stretch of sidewalk. There was no temporary crossing anywhere in front of that, or no sign in front of that to encourage pedestrians to go to the other side of the road, all that. But you see that, unfortunately, see that too often. And here's one that's talking that the sidewalk is open, but in fact, you know, it effectively closed the PAR. And this was, you know, in an effort to accommodate a business, you know, hey, you know, you're doing work here, I need to remain open. I get all that, but in a, you know, apparently, you know, well, it just wasn't open enough, I guess. And here's the checklist, another piece of guidance. Again, it's you guys have it as a handout or something you can print off later. Considerations during planning: provide safe TPAR that replaces existing as best as you can. Avoid leading pedestrians into conflict points with construction equipment. These are all, quite no-brainers when you think about it. Avoid leading pedestrians into conflict with mainline traffic. Determine if the temporary work zone impact on pedestrian, including generators such as schools, senior centers, transit stops, shopping areas. That might impact how you whether or not you use, flashing lights or audible, those types of considerations are kind of all there. Access to the access of the work zone on existing pedestrian flow. There are places, in downtown areas where, you need to really consider, closing a sidewalk early in order to make sure that, pedestrians are optimized and away from all that. And then there's consideration during design: provide advanced information and transition information. That's, both traffic and pedestrians. Work area information, ingress, egress, direction for pedestrians. Define detours clearly, provide advanced signage, all the stuff we've talked about. Avoid mid-block crossings to the extent you can. Mirror existing routes in terms of length on your detour to the extent you can. I had a complaint once, and man, the detour was it was so long. It had to be there, but at the same time, it just did not mirror what was being impacted. But it was really more of a kind of a landscape issue. There were no alternatives with pedestrian facilities, so we had the community install it. It was a lengthy detour, and they put in some temporary ramps and things like that. They fixed some discontinuities in the sidewalks along the way, so they did some things along a long stretch. But having said that, the shorter the better. The more it mirrors what's being impacted, the better. Maintain continuous access routes along work zone for the life of the project. So don't think, well, we're only going to be here for a couple days. Nobody has a crystal ball. You need to really make sure that people with disabilities are able to negotiate these, and pedestrians in general can negotiate the work zone safely. Obviously, you need to be accessible to people with disabilities, maintain access to businesses, residents, transit facilities, etc. Use additional devices for visual disabilities, audible devices when needed, or when implicated. Encourage it all the time, but there may be scenarios where it could be a short duration, and then you might consider having somebody there to kind of help people through. If you're only there for a few hours, you might have somebody, a worker, who can help people negotiate the work zone. Adequate physical separation from the work site. I think that's really talking about those barriers. Detours, I think, additional signage and transitional signage, I guess is what they're saying. Just make sure people have advance warning. Keep construction debris. These are all the things in the checklist that really make a lot of sense. I just really always thought that was good, and this kind of mirrors that other piece of that other guidance document that you have. Inspect traffic control devices regularly. So I know, at least in the the traffic MOT devices are inspected at least daily. Just include the TPAR in that. That's important, and just make sure it's accessible through all phases. So kind of wrapping up here, just be inclusive in your thinking, your planning, and your implementation. Remember that these are public rights of way and public projects, and we are public servants who work on behalf of all. This is kind of that non-discrimination discussion. you know, we need to be inclusive in our thinking. I was encouraged, you know, again, listening to Eric talk about how, you know, equity is now sort of a backbone, if you will, sort of a fundamental part of our future transportation. You know, it's nice to see that be codified a bit more. Disabilities include a wide range of conditions. Do not only think in terms of wheelchair access, but you know, they do include mobility, sensory, and cognitive disabilities. So, you know, consider that as you're working on or you know, discussing projects with your locals. Non-compliance puts your agency at risk. You know, as I noted, we've had 2 ADA complaints relating to temporary work zones. You know, they were kind of a part of, you know, in some cases there was more to it. One time it was the actual complaint, and then the other one, it was sort of one of many issues that were being discussed. Just know that ADA is a civil rights statute. You know, it's not an unfunded mandate, you know, that a lot of folks think. I think this group in particular appreciates that, and I really do again want to thank you guys. You know, the MPO group, you guys have always had our back when we've kind of pushed this thing forward, you know, ADA compliance forward, and you know, temporary work zones are no different. So if you guys have any questions ever, this is how you can get me, and I'm willing to take any questions you may have.
Someone asks, what types of mobile audible devices are available?
That's a great question. I really don't know. You know, I've seen like, I saw a guy at road school, and he had like, it's like a stanchion. It's not particularly like it looks like a cone almost, but it had like a message that would read out. But I honestly, I don't know really, you know, Federal Highway, we're not involved in procurement. But I know there's stuff out there. Really, just a quick Google search is going to inundate you with lots of options in terms of, I think there's some that are like cane activated. So if you hit the barrier, then the message comes on. There are some that constantly, you know, they kind of read out a constant message. So there are a lot of options out there, but I really just don't know. I don't see them. Unfortunately, I don't see them on our jobs very much, so if at all. So sorry, I can't really answer that.
I do have one quick question, Mr. Woodruff. You did say that you're proud of what you're seeing generally across Indiana in terms of pedestrian accommodation in work zones. Do you have a sense for how well we stack up with regards to other states, you know, regionally and or nationally?
Yeah, I'd clarify. I'm more proud of what we've done on the transition plan front, and not so much on the work zones.
I see.
But in the transition plan world, I'll give you an A+, and you know, not to compare other states. There are others that similarly have you know, worked to get their local public agencies to, you know, have the required transition plans. But I believe that a lot of those states are using the model that we used, you know, that we kind of put out sort of the training really brought to us by the MPO Council and all you guys, you know, giving us the venue and really the customer base that we needed to reach. And so there, again, I just, without comparing, I'm just going to say, you know, Indiana A+ on the transition plan, and I would like to get us to A+ on the work zone stuff. And you know, I think INDOT is similarly kind of interested in making sure that we're getting it right. And I think we're trying to develop some tools that might be a little kind of user friendly. They may not be as comprehensive as we'd want, but at the same time, kind of the checklist sort of approach, like, are barriers present? Are they properly installed? You know, those types of things, so that project managers or people who aren't as versed in ADA can go out and just sort of make an assessment and maybe work with the contractors to sort of do some improvements along the line. And I also think that NDOT has gone so far as to make sure that, you know, there are specific items in their contract, you know, the pay items to make sure that contractors are compensated properly for the work that they do. You know, so they're requiring sort of a positive barriers, and then they'll pay them for it if they're out there. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think it does.
Yeah. Again, you know, just kudos to the MPO council and all the MPOs that sort of helped keep this topic alive. I really do appreciate it very much.
Well, we appreciate that, and we appreciate your time and presentation and your efforts, Mr. Woodruff. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
we are a little bit closer to being on schedule, but we're still a little bit ahead of schedule. Mr. Hannon, are you with us?
I am.
All right. Well, if you're ready, we can go ahead and move in your direction, and we'll have Aria introduce you.